My fiancé said it like it was already settled. Like this was something I was supposed to accept calmly, maybe even prove myself over. My bachelor party is going to be a 2-week trip to Europe, he said, casually pushing his food around the plate. With my ex. Don't be the controlling girlfriend. I didn't answer right away. 2 weeks. Europe. With the woman he used to love before me. The restaurant kept moving around us, cutlery clinking, voices overlapping. But my body went completely still. I felt it first in my hands, the way my fingers stopped moving like they needed time to process what I'd just heard. Our wedding is in 6 weeks, I said carefully. That's really close. He shrugged. We'd leave in 10 days. Be back with 2 weeks to spare. It's fine. Fine. I asked who else was going. He hesitated, just a beat too long. Me, Van, Kyle, and Lena. Lena. His ex-girlfriend. The woman he dated for 2 years before me. The one whose name never fully disappeared from our lives, no matter how much he claimed it was ancient history. You're planning a 2-week bachelor trip with your ex-girlfriend? I asked. He sighed, already irritated. God, here we go. This is exactly why I waited to tell you. I knew you'd make it weird. We went back and forth for over an hour. Every concern I raised got reframed as a flaw in me. I was insecure. I didn't trust him. I didn't understand modern relationships. He used words like emotional maturity and personal growth. Told me that if I really loved him, I wouldn't try to control his freedom. Eventually, something inside me shut down. Not agreement. Exhaustion. Fine, I said quietly. Do whatever you want. Relief washed over his face immediately. Really? He asked. I nodded. Have a safe flight. He leaned in and kissed my cheek, smiling. Thank you, babe. This is why I love you. You get it. I didn't get it, but I understood something else. That if I kept fighting, I'd lose, and if I stayed calm, I could think. That night, while he slept peacefully, already planning a vacation with another woman, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling clarity settle into my chest. The next morning, I canceled our wedding venue, not out of anger, out of certainty. And by the time his plane lifted off the runway, I was already setting everything else in motion. When he proposed 8 months earlier, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt settled. We'd been together for 3 years, long enough to know each other's rhythms, long enough to survive bad months and boring stretches, long enough that marriage felt like the natural next step instead of a leap. I was 32, he was 29. We talked about the future in practical sentences, timelines, savings goals, where we might live after the wedding. I said yes without hesitation. He smiled like someone who had just secured something permanent. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and that's where the imbalance quietly took shape. He said planning stressed him out. Too many details, too many decisions. He wanted the day to be beautiful, but he didn't want to be buried in logistics. I told myself that was normal. Everyone has strengths. I was organized. I liked spreadsheets. I liked having things handled. So I handled them. I researched venues, negotiated contracts, tracked deposits, coordinated vendors. He reviewed things in passing, approved aesthetics, vetoed what he didn't like. When it came to money, though, most of it came from me. He framed it like trust, like I was the stable one, the responsible one. I framed it like partnership. We booked the venue for late October, paid deposits, sent save the dates. Families started making plans. My parents were cautiously happy. His parents were openly excited. His mother called me practically family before we'd even picked a caterer. His friend group was tight-knit and loud. Van had been his best friend since college. Opinionated, loyal, always ready to defend him. Kyle was quieter, more observant, the kind of guy who listened more than he spoke. And then there was Lena. Lena existed in conversations the way old furniture exists in a room you swear you're going to redecorate one day. She was his ex-girlfriend, 2 years together before me, 4 years in the past, according to him. Ancient history, nothing to worry about, except her name never really disappeared. He still liked her posts, still laughed at inside jokes when her name came up. Early in our relationship, she'd shown up to a few group hangouts that felt a little too coincidental. Once I asked, carefully, if it bothered him that she was still so present. He laughed it off, said I was reading into it, said I needed to trust him. I apologized. That became the pattern. Any discomfort I expressed got reframed as insecurity. Any boundary I tried to draw turned into a conversation about my trust issues. He was good at that, at sounding reasonable, evolved, patient. If I pushed back, I felt like I was failing some invisible test. So I learned to swallow it. By the time we were 8 months engaged, I thought we'd moved past all of that. I told myself Lena was irrelevant. I told myself wedding stress was making everything feel heavier than it was. 3 weeks before he dropped the Europe trip on me, he started acting lighter, more distracted, more upbeat. He spent more time on his phone, took calls in other rooms, started talking vaguely about needing a reset before the wedding. Van and Kyle came up more often in conversation. Plans, jokes, hypotheticals. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself it was normal. I told myself that love meant not micromanaging someone else's freedom. So when he finally said 2-week bachelor trip to Europe, like it was already approved, it didn't feel like a random bomb. It felt like the last piece snapping into place. And once it did, I couldn't unsee the shape of what I'd been ignoring all along. The first sign wasn't Europe. It was how casually he rewrote the story afterward. The night of that dinner, after I'd said fine and have a safe flight, he acted lighter, almost buoyant, like he'd crossed a finish line instead of detonated a boundary. "You're being really cool about this," he said later when we were getting ready for bed. "I knew you'd come around." Come around. As if this had been a phase I needed to grow out of. I watched him move around our bedroom, folding a shirt, setting his phone on the dresser, humming softly to himself. There was no hesitation in him, no guilt, just relief. That should have scared me more than the trip itself. Over the next few days, the plans took shape, not quietly, not carefully, but openly. He shopped for new clothes, for Europe. Asked my opinion on jackets he'd never wear at home. Bookmarked restaurants on his phone like he was curating a highlight reel instead of a bachelor party. Van and Kyle became part of the background noise. Group texts buzzed constantly. Jokes about passports, about last adventures before the wedding, about how I was a real one for being so understanding. I smiled when I needed to, responded with emojis, played the role. Lena's name started appearing again too, casually, like it had always belonged there. "Lena knows this city really well," he mentioned one morning while making coffee. "She studied abroad there." "Oh," I said. "I didn't realize she was helping plan." He shrugged. "It's not planning. She's just giving suggestions." Suggestions turned into logistics. He mentioned hotels she liked, neighborhoods she recommended, museums she'd already mapped out. When I asked where Van and Kyle were staying, he waved it off. "They'll figure it out." I noticed what he didn't say. He never said we were staying anywhere. He never said they were doing things together. Everything was singular. Him, Lena, cities, plans. I started paying closer attention. He took a call from Lena in the hallway one evening. Low voice, back turned. When I walked past, he stopped talking, laughed it off, said it was nothing. I believed him, or I told myself I did. The week before his trip, he transferred money out of our joint wedding account. "Just moving things around," he said when I asked. "Some last-minute expenses." I didn't push. I didn't ask for receipts. I told myself this was what trust looked like. The night before he left, he was almost giddy. Suitcase open on the bed, outfits laid out, phone lighting up with messages I didn't read. He kissed me longer than usual, promised he'd text when they landed, told me he loved me. "You're really okay with this?" he asked one last time, searching my face. I held his gaze. "I just want you to have fun," I said. And I meant it, in the way someone means it when they've already stepped back emotionally. The morning of his flight, I drove him to the airport. We talked about mundane things, traffic, weather, what I should eat for dinner while he was gone. He hugged me at the curb, kissed my forehead, told me he'd miss me. I watched him disappear through security. I waited until his plane was in the air. Then I went home, opened my laptop, and started making phone calls. Because whatever this was becoming, I wasn't going to meet it blind. Not out of spite, out of instinct. There's a moment, right after someone crosses a line, when you either start doubting yourself or you start documenting. I chose the second. The first call I made was to the wedding venue. I still remember the way my voice sounded. Steady, polite, almost detached. "Hi," I said, "I need to cancel a reservation." The coordinator pulled up our file. Late October, prime season, deposits paid. She asked the question everyone asks. "May I ask why?" I hesitated for exactly 1 second. My fiancé is taking a 2-week trip to Europe with his ex-girlfriend as his bachelor party. There was silence on the line, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she exhaled softly. "Oh!" I could hear her typing again, slower this time. Careful. "I'm very sorry," she said. "Normally, the deposit is non-refundable unless there are extraordinary circumstances." "What qualifies as extraordinary?" I asked. "Illness, military deployment, death in the family." I almost laughed. "Well," I said calmly, "this feels pretty extraordinary to me." Another pause. I'm going to process this personally, she said finally. I'll mark it as an exception. You should receive the full deposit back within 5 business days. I closed my eyes. $8,500, money I had paid, suddenly freed up. I thanked her, hung up, sat there for a moment, letting my heartbeat settle. Then I made the second call. A friend of mine from college, Trevor. A lawyer. Not family law, but close enough to know who to call when things started turning sideways. This is insane, he said after I explained everything. You're serious about this? He's in Europe with his ex, I said. For 2 weeks. I want proof. Real proof. There was a beat. Okay, he said, I know someone. By that afternoon, I was sitting across from a private investigator named Dominic in a quiet coffee shop. He listened without interrupting, took notes, asked precise questions. I can't follow them overseas personally, he said, but I can do background check, social media monitoring, and I have a contact abroad who can do limited surveillance. How limited? Hotels, dining, public behavior. Enough to establish patterns. And the cost? $8,000 minimum for 2 weeks. Could go higher depending on what we find. I thought about the venue deposit. Do it, I said. The next week was a performance. He texted me constantly. Just boarded. This airport is wild. You'd love the architecture here. I responded like nothing was wrong. Sounds amazing. Have fun. Miss you too. At night, he FaceTimed me from hotel rooms I couldn't see clearly. Always positioned just right. Background blurred. Voice relaxed. He told me about museums and food and long walks through cities he never once suggested we visit together. You're being so great about this, he said one night. I knew you'd come around. I smiled at the screen. Inside, I waited. The first report came 3 days into the trip. Dominic emailed me with the subject line, Update 1. I opened it slowly. Subject and Lena checked into a boutique hotel together in the first city. 2 rooms, adjoining. My hands went cold. Van and Kyle are staying elsewhere. I stared at the screen. What do you mean elsewhere? I typed back. He called me within minutes. They're not even in the same hotel, he said. Van and Kyle are in a hostel about 2 miles away. Much cheaper. Different reservation. And Lena? Same hotel as your fiancé. Booked under her credit card. Reservation made 6 weeks ago. Both rooms. 6 weeks. Before he ever told me about the trip. There's more, Dominic said. My chest tightened. My contact observed them at dinner last night. Just the 2 of them. Very intimate, hand-holding, prolonged eye contact. I closed my laptop. Sat there. Breathed. Send me everything, I said. The photos came through an hour later. Him leaning toward her across a candlelit table, her hand resting on his. Another of them walking through a plaza, her head on his shoulder like it belonged there. I didn't cry. I felt something sharper, clearer. I picked up my phone and called Trevor again. I need to know my legal options, I said. For what? He used money from our wedding account to fund this trip, I said. Can I hold him accountable? There was a pause. Yes, Trevor said slowly. And now that you have proof? Absolutely. That was the moment everything crossed from suspicion into inevitability. This wasn't about a trip anymore. It was about deception. And consequences. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't call him and demand explanations while he was halfway across the world. I sat very still. There's a kind of shock that doesn't come with noise. It settles into your chest like weight. Heavy, quiet, undeniable. I stared at the photos again, longer this time, not to punish myself, but to understand what I was looking at. Not a misunderstanding, not a coincidence, not a moment taken out of context. This was intimacy. This was planning. This was choice. I zoomed in on details I'd once ignored, the way his body angled toward hers, how comfortable her hand looked on his arm, the ease of it. The familiarity, the kind you don't fake after 4 years apart. I thought about every time I'd swallowed discomfort, every time I'd apologized for feeling uneasy, every conversation where I'd been told I needed to trust him more. Trust, I realized, wasn't what I'd lacked. Evidence was. I closed my laptop and walked into the kitchen. Made coffee I didn't drink. Let the machine hum just to fill the silence. My hands shook, not wildly, just enough to notice. I rested them on the counter until they stopped. When my phone buzzed, I almost ignored it. His name lit up the screen. Miss you, he'd texted. This place is unreal. Wish you were here. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Looks beautiful, I typed. Have fun. The words felt like ash. Later that night, he video called me. I almost didn't answer, but I needed to see him. Needed to hear his voice. Needed to understand how someone could look so normal while living a lie so comfortably. Hey, he said, smiling at the screen. He looked relaxed, sun-kissed, happy. Hey, I said back. He angled the camera carefully, too carefully. White walls, neutral background, no sign of anyone else. Just wanted to see your face, he said. This trip has been exactly what I needed. What do you mean? I asked. A reset, he said. Before the wedding, before everything gets real. Everything wasn't already real to him. Where are Van and Kyle? I asked casually. There was a pause. Oh, he said. I think they went out. Pub or something. And you? I asked. He smiled. Lena and I just got back from dinner. Incredible place. She knows all the best spots. Just the two of them. Again. I nodded. Sounds nice. He didn't notice the shift, or he chose not to. We talked for a few more minutes, about nothing. Weather, food, how much he missed our bed. He told me he loved me. I said it back, because at that point, love didn't feel like permission anymore. It felt like observation. When we hung up, I didn't sit there replaying his words. I opened my laptop again. That night, I canceled everything. The caterer, the photographer, the florist, the DJ. Some deposits were lost. Some vendors were sympathetic when I explained why. By midnight, I had a spreadsheet open. Numbers, confirmations, cancellation policies. I tracked every dollar. $14,000 recovered out of $32,000 already paid. I'd covered most of it. I called my mother before I went to bed. She'd already heard. The florist had called her by mistake. I'm so sorry, she said softly after I told her everything. I never trusted him. That surprised me more than it should have. He always acted like you were lucky to have him, she continued, like he was doing you a favor. I stared at the dark ceiling while she spoke. I thought I was, I said quietly. You're not, she said. You're just the first woman who stopped letting him get away with it. I slept for 3 hours that night. When I woke up, my phone was already lighting up with his messages. Photos, smiling selfies, jokes. I didn't respond, because reacting emotionally would have given him something to argue with. Instead, I started preparing for the moment he'd have to face what he'd done, without excuses, without spin, without the comfort of distance. And for the first time since this began, I felt steady, cold, ready. Once the decision was made, everything moved faster than my emotions could keep up with. The evidence kept coming. Dominic's updates arrived every couple of days, always clinical, always precise, no opinions, no assumptions, just facts, timestamps, locations. Dinner again. Sightseeing, just the two of them. Van and Kyle appearing occasionally, briefly, like proof that could be pointed to if needed, but never enough to change the pattern. It wasn't a bachelor party. It was a couple on vacation with witnesses rotated in when convenient. I stopped opening the photos right away. I didn't need to see them anymore. The shape of the truth was already clear. What I needed now was structure. I called Trevor again. He used money I transferred to him for wedding expenses, I said. $4,000. I can prove it. That's enough, Trevor replied. We'll start with a demand letter, fraud and misappropriation of funds, possibly breach of promise. Breach of promise? I asked. It's old, he said, but it still applies in cases where one party materially deceives the other while accepting financial support for marriage-related expenses. I thought about the receipts I'd never asked for. The alterations, he said, cost more than they did. The travel charges dated the same week I sent the money. Draft it, I said. While Trevor worked, I stayed quiet. I answered his texts like nothing had changed. Architecture here is insane. You'd love this place. Miss you. I replied with neutral warmth. Looks amazing. Sounds fun. Miss you too. It wasn't lying. It was containment. On day 6, he video called me again. He looked tipsy this time, looser, less careful with the camera angle. Hey, he said, grinning. Just wanted to check in. Having fun? I asked. So much, he said. This trip was exactly what I needed. What about Van and Kyle? I asked. A pause, again. Oh, they went their own way tonight, he said. Lena and I just got back from this incredible restaurant. He didn't even try to dress it up anymore. I nodded. Sounds nice. He smiled wider, clearly convinced I was still on his side. After we hung up, I canceled the last remaining vendor. By the end of that week, the wedding no longer existed anywhere except in his imagination. That was when his family entered the picture. His mother called me one evening, her voice tight with concern. The florist said the wedding was canceled, she said. Is everything okay? I told her the truth, calmly, clearly, without embellishment. The trip, the ex, the hotels, the photos. There was silence on the other end of the line. I always thought something was off, she said finally. He never liked boundaries. That didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how quickly the narrative shifted once facts entered the room. She didn't defend him. She didn't minimize. She didn't ask me to be patient. She just said, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Meanwhile, he kept posting photos of plazas, food, smiling group shots with Van and Kyle when it suited him, carefully curated proof of innocence. Lena was never tagged, never centered, but always there, just outside the frame. Dominic sent one more report near the end of the trip. Subject and Lena booked return seats together. Same flight, adjacent rows. That was enough. 3 days before they landed, Trevor filed the lawsuit. Civil claim, $4,000. Fraudulent use of funds. Emotional damages. Breach of promise. The demand letter was sent to his parents' address, still listed as his legal residence on his license. Someone signed for it. He didn't mention it. Either he hadn't received it yet, or he was pretending he hadn't. 2 days later, he texted me asking if I could pick him up from the airport. Landing Tuesday at 4:30. Can you come get me? I stared at the message for a long time. I can't, I replied. Work deadline. Grab an Uber? There was a pause before his response. Seriously, after 2 weeks? Sorry, I typed. Crazy week. He sent an annoyed emoji. Nothing else. He still didn't know. Trevor and I were already planning where we'd stand. Not at arrivals. At the gate. With paperwork. As the day approached, my phone started lighting up more frequently. Messages from him, from Van, from Kyle, casual, friendly, unaware. I didn't block anyone. Not yet, because escalation wasn't about confrontation. It was about timing. And when his plane finally touched down, everything I'd been holding back, the silence, the planning, the restraint, was about to land with him. All at once. The night before his flight home, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious about seeing him, but because there was nothing left to be confused about. Everything that had once blurred together had separated into clean, brutal lines. Truth, deception, choice. I lay on my side in the dark, staring at the wall where passing headlights slid across the paint and disappeared. The apartment felt different now, quieter, like it already understood that whatever walked back through the door tomorrow wouldn't belong here the way it once did. My phone buzzed close to midnight. A message from him. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. We should talk when I get back. Talk. That word used to mean repair. Now it meant delay. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the folder on my laptop one last time. The reports, the timestamps, the charges. I didn't study them. I didn't need to. I only needed to remember why I wasn't wavering. Because there was still a part of me, quiet, stubborn, that remembered the man who proposed. The man who smiled like permanence was a promise. The man who said he wanted a future with me. That memory tried to soften things. It whispered that maybe I was being too harsh, that maybe I should hear him out privately, that maybe this could be handled without destroying everything we'd built. That was the most dangerous moment, when betrayal tried to borrow the language of mercy. I knew exactly how it would go if I backed down. He wouldn't fall apart. He wouldn't break down. He'd get defensive, or minimize it, or blame stress. He'd insist Lena meant nothing, that it looked bad, but wasn't what I thought. He'd talk fast, rationalize everything, reframe it as temporary, misunderstood. He'd promise therapy, promise boundaries, promise change, strategically, convincingly, just enough to regain control. And if I accepted that version of events, nothing would actually change. Because nothing ever had. I stood up and walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, older than I had 3 weeks ago, but my eyes were steady. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. I made coffee I didn't drink, printed one extra copy of the filing, slipped it into my bag, set my phone so video recording could start with a single tap. I wasn't planning a scene. I was planning accountability. Around 3 in the morning, my mother texted me. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. "I will be," I replied. She didn't ask anything else. She knew. Morning came slowly. I showered, got dressed carefully, neutral clothes, nothing dramatic, nothing that suggested I was bracing for impact. I didn't want armor. I wanted credibility. Trevor texted me as I locked the door. Gate confirmed. I'll meet you there. I parked at the airport and sat in the car for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. My heart wasn't racing. That surprised me. I thought about the woman I'd been a month ago, the one planning a wedding, choosing colors, assuming compromise meant swallowing discomfort. She felt distant now. Inside the terminal, everything was bright and impersonal. Families waiting with balloons, children running ahead of tired parents, couples reuniting like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. I stood off to the side near the gate, watching passengers begin to spill out. Van appeared first, then Kyle, then him, laughing, relaxed, still carrying the glow of a vacation he thought had no consequences. He saw me and smiled immediately, relief flashing across his face. Then he noticed Trevor. Then he noticed the folder in my hand. His smile didn't disappear. It faltered. Just slightly. Enough. That was the moment. Not the confrontation, not the paperwork, not the fallout yet. Just the realization crossing his face that something had shifted, and he wasn't in control of it anymore. I took a slow breath, stepped forward, and closed the distance between who I used to be and who I had become. I stepped into his line of sight just as he cleared the gate. Up close, he looked exactly like someone who believed he'd gotten away with it. Relaxed shoulders, easy smile, the faint confidence of a man who thought the worst part was over. "Hey," he said, voice warm. "What are you doing here?" Then his eyes flicked past me. To Trevor. To the manila folder in my hand. The smile didn't vanish. It stalled. "Hi," I said evenly. "Welcome home." He laughed once, uncertain. "You didn't say you were coming." "I didn't," I replied. Passengers streamed around us. Reunions, hugs, rolling suitcases. Van and Kyle slowed a few steps behind him, suddenly alert. Lena stood just off to the side, phone in hand, watching. I handed him the folder. He took it automatically, like his body still assumed cooperation. "What's this?" he asked. "Formal notice," I said. "You're being served." The words landed clean and loud enough to cut through the airport noise. His brow furrowed as he opened the folder. The color drained from his face. Not dramatically, just enough to show the shift from confidence to calculation. "This is a joke," he said, glancing up. "Right?" "It's a civil lawsuit," I replied, "for fraudulent use of funds and breach of promise." Van stepped forward. "Hey, let's all calm down." "This doesn't involve you," I said without looking at him. He stopped. My fiancé's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious. Over $4,000? "The $4,000 I transferred to you for wedding expenses," I said, "that you used to fund a 2-week trip to Europe with your ex." Lena's head snapped up. "That's not," he started. "Where's the receipt for your suit alterations?" I asked calmly. He blinked. "It's at home." "No, it isn't," I said. I checked. What I did find was a travel charge dated the same week I sent you that money, and hotel charges, and proof of booking made 6 weeks before you told me about the trip. His mouth opened, closed. Van looked between us, confused. Kyle stared at the floor. "You had someone follow me?" he said, voice sharpening. "I had someone document what you did with money you took from me," I replied. "That documentation is attached." He scoffed. "This is insane." "You stayed in adjoining hotel rooms with Lena," I continued, unflinching. "You had intimate dinners alone. Your friends stayed elsewhere. I have photos." Lena took a step back. "That's not what this was," he said quickly, turning to her. "You know that." I didn't let him redirect. "The wedding is canceled," I said. "All vendors have been notified. The venue refunded the deposit. We're done." People were staring now. A few phones lifted, then lowered again. Airport security glanced over, but didn't intervene. "You can't just do this," he said, voice rising. "You didn't even talk to me." "You talked," I said. "I listened. For 3 years." Van tried again. "Look, emotions are high." "Van," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "You knew exactly what this trip was. Don't insult me now." He fell silent. My fiancé's face hardened. "You're trying to humiliate me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself. I'm just ending it." He laughed, short, brittle. "My lawyer says you don't have a case." I smiled, just slightly. "You don't have a lawyer yet." That did it. The realization hit him, not all at once, but in pieces. The canceled wedding, the closed accounts, the paper in his hands, the witnesses. "This is about control," he said. "You couldn't stand not being in charge." "It's about accountability," I replied. "You crossed a boundary and assumed there would be no consequences." I turned to leave. Behind me, his voice cracked, not breaking, but sharp with panic. "You can't just walk away." "I already did," I said, and kept going. Trevor matched my pace. In the parking garage, the air felt cooler, quieter. "That was nuclear," he said. "Necessary," I replied. For the first time since this began, the balance had shifted. Not because I raised my voice, because I told the truth and didn't back down. The silence after the airport confrontation didn't last long. It never does. By the time I got home, my phone was already vibrating across the kitchen counter like something alive. Missed calls, texts, notifications stacked on top of each other so fast they blurred. His name, Van's, Kyle's, numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored all of it. I poured a glass of water I didn't finish and sat at the table, letting the noise exist without engaging it. This was the part people never talk about. The aftermath where everyone suddenly has opinions, where truth gets bent into versions that are easier to swallow. At 6 o'clock on the dot, the messages started coming in waves. "We need to talk like adults. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I'm coming over right now." I didn't respond. A few minutes later, "Lena was just a friend. You're blowing this out of proportion. This is insane." That one made me exhale slowly through my nose. Insane was planning a wedding while funding a secret vacation with your ex. Insane was assuming no one would ever check. The doorbell rang around 6:40 p.m. I didn't open it. He knocked harder, louder. His voice carried through the door, tight, controlled, trying to sound reasonable for anyone who might be listening. "Just talk to me," he said. "You're overreacting." I stood on the other side of the door, phone in my hand, recording. I didn't say a word. He stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, long enough for a neighbor to open their door and tell him they'd call the police if he didn't leave. That finally did it. He left shouting about how unfair this was, about how I was trying to ruin him. I saved the video. More evidence. The next few days were chaos. He tried different approaches, each one more revealing than the last. First came the rational version. Calm texts about misunderstandings, about how things looked worse than they were, about how I'd acted without hearing his side. Then came the victim version. He told mutual friends I'd freaked out over a harmless trip, that I was controlling, that I'd blindsided him with legal threats. Some people believed it at first. But stories don't hold up when details start surfacing. Why were Van and Kyle staying in a different hotel? Why were there photos of him and Lena alone every night? Why was wedding money tied to travel charges? The questions spread faster than his excuses. His sister called me midweek. We'd always gotten along. She didn't waste time. "Is it true?" she asked. "About Lena?" "Yes," I said. She sighed heavily. "I told him not to go on that trip. I told him it looked bad. He said you were totally fine with it." "Of course he did." "I'm sorry," she added. "For what it's worth, you dodged a bullet." The legal side moved quietly, but relentlessly. Trevor forwarded me the response from his lawyer. Aggressive, accusatory. Claims of harassment, defamation, unlawful surveillance. Trevor dismantled it point by point. Hiring a licensed investigator was legal. Truth was a defense to defamation. Financial records didn't lie. After discovery, the tone changed. We subpoenaed bank statements, confirmed the travel agency charge, found hotel payments linked to his account, Venmo transactions between him and Lena going back months, inside jokes, heart emojis, timing that lined up too perfectly to explain away. This hadn't been impulsive. It had been planned. His desperation escalated. He tried to access the joint wedding account. I'd already closed it. The bank called to confirm, told me he'd shown up in person demanding access. When they informed him the account was closed, he'd accused them of discrimination, of financial abuse. They documented everything. Then his mother started calling my family. My parents, my aunt, even my grandmother. Stories about abandonment, about cruelty, about how devastated their family was. My mother shut it down in one conversation. "Your son took a 2-week romantic vacation with his ex using my daughter's money," she said. "She has proof. Please stop calling." There were no more calls after that. 3 weeks after the airport, the last play came in the form of a handwritten letter, delivered to my building's office. "I made mistakes. I see that now. But I love you. I've always loved you. Lena meant nothing. It was comfort. Familiarity. You're who I want to marry. Please, can we talk?" I took a photo, sent it to Trevor. "That's an admission," he replied. "Beautiful." The settlement came through a few days later. He agreed to repay the $4,000 in installments, $400 a month for 10 months. He also signed a statement acknowledging misuse of funds intended for wedding expenses. His lawyer tried to push back on that clause. Trevor reminded them we could go to trial instead, where everything would become public record. He signed. I saw him one last time at the settlement meeting. He looked smaller, tired, stripped of the confidence that had once protected him. Lena wasn't there. Apparently they'd had a falling out. That didn't surprise me. As we were leaving, he tried to speak to me. "I really am sorry," he said. I stopped, looked at him. "Okay," I said. That was all, and it was more than he deserved. The fallout didn't end with the settlement. It just stopped being loud. $400 hit my account every month like clockwork. A small, unemotional reminder that actions leave marks long after apologies run out. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't dwell on it. I let it sit where it belonged. As closure, I didn't have to chase. Financially, I still took a hit. Even after refunds and the settlement, I lost about $14,000 on the wedding. Venue fees, deposits, plans for a future that never happened. And honestly, worth every penny. Because what I gained was clarity before permanence, before mortgages, before kids, before a life where disentangling would have cost far more than money. Some people told me I was too harsh, that I should have talked to him first, that I should have given him a chance to explain, that serving him at the airport was extreme. But here's the thing they didn't see. I had talked for years. I had explained my boundaries. I had asked for honesty. Every time I raised a concern, it was reframed as my insecurity. Every boundary became an obstacle to his freedom. Every doubt got smoothed over with language designed to make me question myself instead of his behavior. The lawsuit wasn't about the money. It was about accountability. It was about forcing a consequence that couldn't be gaslit away or softened with promises. Something real. Something documented. Something that made it impossible for him to pretend none of this mattered. And it worked. My life now is quieter. Work is busy in a good way. The apartment feels like mine again. I don't flinch when my phone lights up. I don't rehearse conversations in my head that never go anywhere. I'm dating again. Slowly, intentionally. I tell the story early. Not because I'm bitter, but because transparency is the baseline now. The right people don't flinch when they hear it. They listen. They ask thoughtful questions. They respect the answer. As for him, last I heard, he's single. Lena moved on quickly. Van keeps his distance. Kyle stopped returning calls. The narrative he tried to sell didn't survive contact with facts. And that's the lesson I carry forward. Love doesn't require you to abandon your instincts. Trust doesn't mean ignoring patterns. And boundaries aren't control. They're clarity. If someone asks you to accept something that feels wrong and then punishes you for questioning it, that's not modern love. That's manipulation with better branding. Thank you to everyone who's shared their own stories, sent messages of support, or recognized themselves somewhere in mine. If this resonated, I hope you'll comment, share, and subscribe, because these conversations matter, and no one should feel crazy for demanding honesty. Some endings don't look like forgiveness. Sometimes they look like walking away with your spine intact, and that's more than enough.